It's Advent. Can you feel it? Aren't you excited? It's Happy New Year, right? It's the church's new year. The season of Advent is what kicks it all off, gets us started on a brand new start. And we should be excited. Everybody go, yay! All right. How do you know it's Advent? When you walked in here today, did you notice anything different? Yeah. The elves from the deacons came in here over the weekend, and look what happens. Transformation. All of a sudden, you can't really tell, but normally there's something hanging here that has a color on it, and it's, what color has it been? Does anyone remember? Green, exactly. Green is the color of the church year for Pentecost. It starts with red, and then it goes to green. And that season lasts for 26 weeks. I'm tired of ordinary time. Green is my favorite color, but I got to tell you, when I came into church at 9 o'clock, when we wear our stoles and our robes, I got to wear shiny colors. Actually, the color we choose here is purple for Advent. This is two-sided, so I could be either one. The church I served last was a church that used blue to celebrate Advent, and that depends on your own congregation. But whatever, I never get to wear this because you guys wear purple. So I'm going to stage a little bit of a protest this year and wear blue. All during Advent, just to show you that there are varieties of how people celebrate Advent. This right here is new as well. This is our Advent wreath. This started in the 16th century by the German Lutherans. You're welcome. But by the 19th century, this had changed into this kind of recognizable figure that you see today. There are 4 candles that surround the white Christ candle in the middle, and the 4 candles represent the 4 weeks of Advent. Advent lasts for 4 weeks, and they all have different kind of designations to them, and that varies from church to church. But this 3rd candle is what's known as the Gaudete candle. And that celebrates the 3rd Sunday of Advent, where Mary is told that she's going to have a baby, and she celebrates that by singing. And her response, her singing response, is called the Magnificat, literally meaning, my soul magnifies the Lord. You remember that song? So that's coming up. So that's why it's pink, because it is a special recognition for that particular Sunday, and the reason why all of this is pink and purple is because it represents, in the Catholic Church when it was first started, the vestments colors that the priests would wear during the season of Advent. It was purple and rose. So this particular candle is called the Gaudete candle, which literally means rejoice, and rejoice is the first word of the liturgy that they used when they came into the Advent service. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice, from Psalm 85. Do you all remember that? So that's where all this stuff comes from. See, you're learning so much. Isn't that great? But it varies what we do. The whole thing is supposed to represent an amazing transformation of the world as it comes most fully into itself. And that is recognized by the idea of the incarnation. God breaking into the world literally means becoming flesh, or in other words, becoming human. And that's signified by the white candle in the middle, the Christ candle. Now there are originations of Advent that started in the 5th century, where it was lasting 40 days instead of 4 weeks. Originally, Advent was 40 days. It was supposed to be the exact counterpart to Lent, which is a 40-day celebration to prepare yourself for Easter, right? Advent was the exact same thing for Christmas. It gave you 40 days to prepare and wait for the coming of the Christ during Christmas. But in the 9th century, that got reduced to 4 weeks, though the idea of preparing and waiting is still the same. That incarnational feel of anticipation of the world about to change and do something absolutely new is represented by the white candle. And that now goes into a 4-week cycle and then ends on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And then Christmas lasts how many days? 12. Oh, you guys are good. Okay. Now, Advent is celebrated lots of different ways. Sometimes the candles are purple and pink, like I said, to go with the vestments that the priests wore during the season. But sometimes, like in my old congregation, it was blue. And sometimes in other Protestant churches, to get away from the whole kind of Catholic idea, they went with altogether different colors and just went with the colors of the season and did all red candles. So that varies. Some people use the Christ candle in the middle, some people don't. Some people designate these candles and do themes surrounding them. Like today, the first day, we had a reading about hope, right? The first candle is hope. The second candle is peace. The third candle is love. Not because of Mary, but because love is the highest of the qualities of Christ, right? And then this last one would be joy, and then the Christ candle in the middle for Christmas Eve. So there's lots of different ways to celebrate Advent. And we have chosen to use purple and to have a Christ candle, but we do them for the sake of our own culture, our own celebration. And we have lots of different ways to celebrate in our own homes. We all have our own traditions. And while we are thinking now during the music, I'd like you to stop and embrace all this wonderfulness of decoration that's around you and surrounding you and upholding you for Advent. And while we listen to the music, stop and think about your own family traditions and why you do the things you do so that you can talk with each other throughout the season about why Advent is so important.
They're such nice students, aren't they? This week we go back to Luke 1, since it's Advent, and we pick up with verse 5. During the rule of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest assigned service in the regiment of Abijah. His name was Zechariah. His wife was descended from the daughters of Aaron. Her name was Elizabeth. Together they lived honorably before God, careful in keeping the ways of the commandments and enjoying a clear conscience before God. But they were childless because Elizabeth could never conceive. And now that they were quite old, It so happened that as Zechariah was carrying out his priestly duties before God, working the shift assigned to his regiment, it came his one turn in life to enter the sanctuary of God and to burn incense. The congregation was gathered and praying outside the temple at the hour of the incense offering. Unannounced, an angel of God appeared just to the right of the altar of incense. Zechariah was paralyzed in fear. But the angel reassured him, "Don't fear, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Elizabeth, your wife, will bear a son by you. You are to name him John. You're going to leap like a gazelle for joy, and not only you, many will delight in his birth. He'll achieve great stature with God. He'll drink neither wine nor beer. He'll be filled with the Holy Spirit from the moment he leaves his mother's womb. He will turn many sons and daughters of Israel back to their God. He will herald God's arrival in the style and strength of Elijah, soften the hearts of parents to children, and kindle devout understanding among hardened skeptics. He'll get the people ready for God." Zechariah said to the angel, "Do you expect me to believe all this? I'm an old man, and my wife is an old woman." Should never say that. But the angel said, "I am Gabriel, the sentinel of God, sent especially to bring you this glad news. But because you won't believe me, you'll be unable to say a word until the day of your son's birth. Every word I've spoken to you will come true on time, God's time."
A quote from Alice in Wonderland. "There is no use trying," said Alice. "One can't believe in possible things." "I dare say you haven't had much practice," said the Queen. "When I was your age, I always did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast."
So Zechariah is a priest. He's been training his whole life to be a priest. And once in a lifetime, you get the honor to go into the Holy of the Holies in the sanctuary of the temple in order to light the incense in the sanctuary. This is his chance. This is his honor. He is so excited, he can't believe it. He finally gets to do this, and everybody is sitting around waiting for this experience for him so that when he comes back out, he can tell them all about it. This is his shot. So he goes in to the Holy of the Holy. He lights the incense, and who should appear right beside the incense but the angel Gabriel with a message for him. He is paralyzed with fear. He's been training his whole life for this. Who should he expect in the Holy of Holies if not the angel of God? And yet, he's paralyzed. The angel says to him, "Do not fear, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Elizabeth, your wife, will bear a son by you. You are to name him John. You're going to leap like a gazelle for joy, and not only you, many will delight in his birth. He'll achieve great stature with God." What an amazing message. Imagine you and your wife wanting to have children forever, and finally God hears your prayer as you're standing in the Holy of Holies. What good news! The angel says you should be jumping for joy like a gazelle. And that's exactly what Zechariah does, right? No, not at all. In fact, Zechariah insults the angel by saying, "Do you actually expect me to believe this? I'm an old man and my wife is an old woman." Smart move, Will. Don't ever say that. So here he is, his once-in-a-lifetime shot. He finally gets in there. He's paralyzed with fear, doesn't know what to do when he actually does see an angel. And then what does he do? He insults the angel to the point where the angel responds by striking him speechless. Not a really good plan for Zechariah, right? Can you imagine Zechariah coming out of the sanctuary of the Holy of Holies? All those people that were surrounding, waiting for the story, what's it really like? What really happens in there? Did you see God? And he can't talk. So he's probably flailing around. How do you tell somebody you've seen an angel? How do you tell someone you're going to be a dad? Impossible things are happening, and he has no way to tell anybody. He has to find a way. He has to sit for 9 months in silence. That would kill me. And figure out a way to think on how impossible things happen with impossible people. But this is what Advent's all about, I think. It's practicing believing in the unbelievable. When I first came here, I've been in ministry 25 years. I've been in the ordained ministry for 5 years before I came here. Now I've got 5 more. I was trained in the seminary in preaching, in theology, in church history, in pastoral care, in prayer, in worship, in all kinds of manner of good priestly things. You'd think I'd expect to see God here too. But I think I didn't really fully understand the power of prayer until I came here, even though I'm the one that actually gave instruction on prayer. It wasn't until I actually practiced the unbelievableness of it with all of you that it came alive for me. I mean, I always thought God was out there. I always thought God was listening. I know that God cares about me and loves me, and God's out there somewhere doing something great, and I really hope to be a part of that someday. But it's real when you meet Gabriel face to face, when you actually sit and listen in silence for the voice of God that is with you all the time. And it wasn't until I started practicing that with you all here that I began to understand the power of prayer. Practicing that God is actually right there, as close as my next breath, listening to me, conversing with me. I think that was one of the keys, is I never shut up long enough to listen to God talking back. Ask my mom. She tells me that all the time. I was just home for Thanksgiving. I got a reminder. But what do you do, right? I think most of us are in this place where we think God's a really nice concept out there, and it's a really great way to live your life as a Christian, if nothing else. But what would you do if you became face to face with Gabriel? What would your reaction be? I got to tell you, I met Don Henley a couple years ago, and I nearly fainted. What would I do if I ran into Gabriel? Don Henley's the drummer for the Eagles, for any of you who don't know that. It's one of my heroes. You got to practice believing in the unbelievable. And that's what Advent asks us to do. It's not quite the 9 months that Zechariah had, but it's 4 weeks of waiting and watching and preparing in wonder for what's about to happen. Sitting in anticipation for the whole transformation of the world. It's an amazing thing. Frederick Buechner is somebody who is one of my favorite authors. He's also a Presbyterian minister, and he's written a ton of books, but one of my favorite ones is called Telling the Truth, the Gospel as Comedy, Tragedy, and Fairy Tale. And what he talks about is that tragedy, gospel as tragedy, is that we live in the inevitable, okay? But gospel as comedy is the unexpected. And the gospel as fairy tale is that those unexpected things happen all the time. What he writes is perhaps this aspect of fairy tale that gives it its greatest power over us. The sense that we have that in that world, as distinct from ours, the marvelous and the impossible thing truly happens. Beasts talk, and flowers come alive, and lobsters quadrille. I don't know what that is. In the world of the fairy tale. And nothing is apt to be as it seems. And if this is true of the creatures the hero meets on his quest, then it's also true of the hero himself, who at any moment may be changed into a beast, or a stone, or a king, or have his heart turned to ice. Maybe above all, they are tales about transformation. Tales where all creatures are revealed in the end for who they really are. That's Advent. Impossible things happening with impossible people. People you would least expect. And perhaps it's so amazingly too good to be true that that's exactly why it is true. That's what fairy tales are all about. But fairy tales bring possibility of impossibility. We need to practice, I think, believing in the unbelievable. So as we listen to some more music, let's think about those things in our lives that need to be changed. Maybe impossible things that seem impossible to change. But think about those things that you would like to change if you can, that you would like to believe that you can change.
Impossible for a plain pumpkin to become a golden carriage. Impossible for a plain country bumpkin and a prince to join in marriage. And 4 gray mice will never be 4 white horses. Such fol-de-rol and fiddle-dee-dee of courses. Impossible. But the world is full of zanies and fools who don't believe in sensible rules, who won't believe what sensible people say. And because these daft and dewy-eyed dopes keep building up impossible hopes, impossible things are happening every day. It's possible for a plain yellow pumpkin to become a golden carriage. It's possible for a plain gunny bumpkin to a prince to join in marriage. And 4 gray mice are easily turned to horses. Such fol-de-rol and fiddle-dee-dee of courses. Quite possible. For the world is full of zanies and fools who don't believe in sensible rules and won't believe what sensible people say. And because these daft and dewy-eyed dopes keep building up impossible hopes, impossible things are happening every day. It's possible. It's possible. It's possible. It's possible. It's possible. It's possible. It's possible.
The world can be a mess. The world seems overwhelming most of the time. There are lots of things that I would like to believe can change. I always said if I were in charge, head would roll, right? It can happen. It does happen all the time. In a sermon recently that Eric was talking about how change does, in fact, happen all the time. And we meet God face to face in those moments, and we don't even realize it. Things like marriage equality, for instance, I never thought it would happen in my lifetime. But it did. Once we open up our minds, Eric said, to even the possibility that something like that could happen, or should happen, or will happen, all of a sudden, with speed, it actually does happen. Impossible things through impossible people. We have people in our own community who do impossible things all the time. This is Ty and Terry Schenzel. How many of you know them? They started a nonprofit organization here in town called the Hope Center for Kids. And the idea was to give kids hope, believing in themselves and in their community and promising them a future even when they think it's impossible. Ty says, kids who struggle with hopelessness have to have the hope that what they see today is not how their future will look. The future has to look a bit brighter in their hearts. I think that's how God wired not only hearts of children, but the hearts of adults too. I want every kid I meet to have hope about the future. I want them to think of the future and be excited. Whoops, let's not do that right now. Thank you. He does amazing things in the midst of impossible odds. And they have a whole culture now of people reaching out to kids and promising them a future and helping make it a reality. Ty and Terry were killed earlier this year in a car accident. And this community lost a huge source of witnessing impossible things happening with impossible people. Witnessing a couple who literally practiced every day, believing in the unbelievable. In their funeral at Christ Community, they showed a memorial video. And we took an excerpt of that memorial video so that we could show Ty speaking in his own words about what gives him hope about impossible things.
Yeah, I think everybody should have a problem, meaning a cause, a burden, an assignment, a mission. So like, what's your problem? It could be like in your face, what's your problem? You got a problem with me? Or it could be taken as, what's your problem? It's what's the baby in your womb, what's the cause, the burden, the thing that you have to see not continue to be what it is. So, and I describe it as my Simeon. Simeon had to see the Messiah, the baby Messiah, before he died. And it's like, I think everybody should have to have something in their heart that they have to see before they die. Their problem, where the problem would no longer be a problem. And so my problem is the hopelessness in the lives of youth, inner city youth and children, African American youth and children. That's my problem. That the hopelessness would end and that they would have hope, and that hope would motivate them to live the life that they were created to live. Does it seem impossible? In some ways it does, but this whole thing has been impossible. So, you got to keep living with a dream that seems impossible, because then that's, where it becomes possible if it's a dream he's put in your heart. So.
Impossible things happen all the time. And communion is a place where we remember the impossible, where we continually practice the impossible. The impossibility that God, in fact, loves us, that God wants to be in relationship with us, impossible people. The impossibility of life that is lived most fully in community with one another, even though sometimes we don't even talk to one another. This community table bears witness every week to the impossibility happening all the time. Because on the night in which he was betrayed, Jesus took bread and broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body given for you. Do this for the remembrance of me." And again after supper he took the cup, and when he had given thanks he gave it to all to drink, saying, "This cup is the New Testament in my blood, shed for you and for all people. Do this in remembrance of me." Frederick Buechner goes on and talks about fairy tale. And he says, "Yet for all of its confusion and wildness, it is a world where the battle goes ultimately to the good, who live happily ever after, and where in the long run everybody's good and evil alike becomes known by its true name." These are the gifts of God for the people of God who are coming most fully alive into who they are. Let us speak together the words of who we are together as a community. We are an open and affirming family of faith, welcoming all to God's table of love and acceptance. We are diverse, yet united by Christ's example. We care for one another, support one another, and challenge one another to become all that God creates us to be. We work together to nurture our community and to promote peace and justice in our conflicted world. We are the community that brings about the impossibility in the name of God. I invite our servers to come forward to prepare the meal. You do not have to be a member of Countryside to participate in this meal with us. We offer an open communion table for all. You don't even need to come forward. If you'd like to receive communion from where you're sitting, just raise your hand and the deacons will bring it to you. We also have gluten-free wafers available for you as well, and the juice is grape juice. So please come share the gifts of God for the people of God.